The next one is what we call as introduction of a chief guest. Very often, in fact, every function will have a chief guest. Sometimes you'll have a chief guest and you'll have a guest of honor. Sometimes you'll have two people or three people, three or four important people. The important thing to remember is the person must be introduced before he or she speaks. If there are three people who are going to speak, introduce the person who is going to speak, then that person speaks. Don't introduce everybody together. If you introduce everybody together, when they start speaking, the audience is confused, who is this person? Because three people have been introduced, they will not be able to link with this person. Introduce the person before the person speaks. That is the first guideline to remember. Second, when you introduce the person, make sure the person is introduced in such a way that he or she becomes more comfortable, not uncomfortable. What do I mean by this? Some years ago, I went to the Manipal Institute of Technology in our campus. It is the engineering college campus. It was a training program for the newly joined teachers. It was a teacher orientation program, and I was sitting there. I was going to be the next speaker, and the person who introduced me said, the next speaker is Ramnarayan. He comes to our swimming pool in the morning. He swims in the morning. He swims in the evening. He's a regular swimmer. If you want to see him, you can go to the swimming pool at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5:30 in the evening. I was stunned because I was not there to speak about swimming. What was said was right. I was going to the swimming pool. I was swimming in the engineering college campus swimming pool. But at that point of time, when I was to be talking to young teachers, I'm being introduced as a swimmer. It didn't help me. I had to tell them I'm basically a teacher. I also swim. They thought I'm basically a swimming coach. I've come to teach. So I had to clarify this. It was a little bit of an embarrassment, though the intentions were to say that I'm a frequent visitor to the campus. It didn't help me. I had to sort of reconnect with the teachers. I recall one very serious seminar on Raja Ram Mohan Roy, where the chief guest, a good friend of mine, his name was Professor Sunny Tharappan. He was to speak about Raja Ram Mohan Roy. It was a very serious seminar, and he told me after the event what happened. He said he was waiting there to be called to speak, and the person introducing Professor Sunny Tharappan was the secretary of the Lions Club. He was a dentist. So the dentist came up and said, one day I was sitting in my clinic and my secretary came to me and said, there is a man sitting outside with a monkey in his hand. This monkey has got a long tooth. One tooth is a long one. This man wanted that tooth to be filed so that the monkey becomes more comfortable. This man was Sunny Tharappan, whom I met in my dental clinic. Now, here is Sunny Tharappan being introduced as a monkey tamer who is going to talk about Raja Ram Mohan Roy. You can imagine how he can start. He was telling me, how do you want me to start the talk on Raja Ram Mohan Roy when I have been introduced as a monkey tamer with a monkey in the hand with a long tooth? Now, all that was said was right. The dentist, what he said was absolutely right. There was nothing wrong in that. But the problem is, it didn't help Sunny Tharappan connect with the audience. Things might be amusing, which you say, but please remember, when the person is going to speak, you should make him more comfortable, not more embarrassed. We often say things which don't help them to build a connect, because whatever it is, the chief guest is seeing the audience for the first time. He doesn't know, will they receive me? Will they accept me? Lions, tigers, all waiting to pounce. That feeling will be there. So there is that trepidation. So at that time, it is better to help them have a rapport beforehand rather than saying things which might be amusing, but it doesn't help. We often say the chief guest sitting here is next to God. When God dies, he becomes the next God. Now, this is not the way to introduce a chief guest. It's in spite of his very busy schedule, he has come. Everybody we say that in spite of his very busy schedule, he has no time to go to toilet, but he has come here. Now, this is the way we introduce the chief. It's not everybody knows he has come. It doesn't mean you should use those overused expressions. So when you use an introduction, please make sure that you speak about the chief guest in such a way that he becomes more comfortable. I will now give you a handout that will give you some guidelines about introducing a chief guest or a guest of honor. We will start with the side which has the title Introduction of a Guest Speaker. It has the title Introduction of a Guest Speaker. Please look at the first guideline. The most frequent committed error by most people who introduce is the first one. And that is, it's important when you introduce someone, don't salute that person. Don't address that person. What do you mean by this? Don't salute the person, don't address the person. When you are introducing a person to the audience, that person needs to be introduced to the audience, not to himself. So don't address that person. Don't salute that person. I'll give you a specific example when I give you an introduction speech as an example at that time. But please remember, this is the one time when you will not address the person being introduced. That's the first guideline. When you introduce a person, that person must not be addressed, must not be saluted, must not be acknowledged as part of your salutation. I'll explain this with the actual example. Don't read his biodata, however big the biodata is. You should not just repeat what is in the biodata. Select what is necessary, what is relevant, so that it becomes appropriate. Don't embarrass him with unrelated information. This I explained to you. Don't tell things which might cause a laugh, but in the process, the person becomes more embarrassed. Don't use superlatives. Don't say he's a fantastic speaker, or you say he's a very humorous speaker. So there will be nothing fantastic or humorous when he starts speaking, and then you get a little disappointed. So don't set expectations which cannot be met. Don't mention his name repeatedly. This too I will explain to you, and don't exceed 3 minutes. However great the person, if somebody is so great, enough information will be available everywhere. There's no need for you to go on repeating all those things. You must select that much information that is necessary to make him comfortable. Why have you invited this person? Why have you chosen him? Why do you think he is the most suitable person for this event on that day? Try to justify that and be done with it in 3 minutes. To make you understand this a little better, I'll give you an actual example of an introduction of a chief guest, taking you through all the components of a public speech. So this handout that is coming to you is an actual introduction of a guest of honor. As you receive this handout, let me give you the background. The speech which you have, I'm not going to read this entire speech. I'm not going to read. I'm just going to take you through the important components of the speech. But the background to this is to let you know that the chief guest or the guest of honor for that event was Dr. G.V. Satyavati, Director General, Indian Council of Medical Research. She is the chief guest for this function. G.V. Satyavati. Now, why I am mentioning that? Why am I mentioning that Satyavati, G.V. Satyavati was the chief guest or the guest of honor? Please look at the first paragraph. Please look at the first paragraph, which is the salutation. Salutation has all the names of the people on the days except the name of G.V. Satyavati. Because I am introducing Satyavati to the audience. I am not introducing Satyavati to Satyavati. So don't address. This is what I mean by saying do not address the person being introduced. No need. There's no need because that person is being introduced to the audience, not to himself or herself. So the first paragraph is the salutation. All the people on the days, the individuals are mentioned. And then the second paragraph. Graduation day represents the culmination of years of perseverance and academic endeavor. For some, it is a pinnacle. For many, it's a landmark. For most, it's a milestone, a prominent milestone on the road to further accomplishments. To inspire us and to confer the degrees today, we have as our chief guest a person who is not only an administrator, not only an academician, not only a researcher, not only a pharmacologist. What is this? Not only. Flourish. Yes, flourish. Use of flourish. Not only. It doesn't give any different meaning, but then it gives that impact. But also the first woman to head the prestigious Indian Council of Medical Research. Paragraph 3, 4, 5 and 6 relate to her achievements, which we have selected, which was given from her office, which we have thought would be most pertinent to speak about at the introduction. The last paragraph, let us see. For this solemn and ceremonial event today, there could not have been a more appropriate person than her to embellish, to enhance, to enlighten, to enrich the occasion. Choice of words. It means the same thing, but it gives that extra fragrance to that speech, using words repeatedly, conveying the same thing to reinforce. I am absolutely delighted to present the shining star of the scientific firmament, the guest of honor, the Director General of the Indian Council of Medical Research, Dr. G.V. Satyavati. Please note that the name G.V. Satyavati comes only once. Nowhere in the introduction, nowhere else in the introduction, Satyavati comes. Everybody knows who is the chief guest. So it is pointless if you say Satyavati, 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 Satyavati. By the time you come to Satyavati, you have enough of Satyavati. You don't want to listen to Satyavati again. So don't go on repeating the person's name, not needed. When you introduce someone, use the person's name sparingly. Don't overuse it so that people get fed up by the time introduction is over. Once or twice you can use. Here I have used it in such a way it only appears once. It's also important when you introduce that person and you mention that person last, make sure that that person's name, Dr. G.V. Satyavati, is very clearly enunciated into the mic. Very often we turn away. Just when that name is to be mentioned, we turn away. Please look at the previous handout. Look at the last paragraph. Please look at the previous handout you received. Look at the last paragraph. Finally, remember not to turn towards the speaker when you enunciate his name or her name. When you turn towards the speaker, you tend to turn away from the microphone and the speaker's name will not be heard. That speaker is waiting for that name to come. Just when that name is coming, you turn away and that name will never be heard. So make sure that you enunciate the name clearly. You must turn towards the speaker. Do so only after the last syllable has been uttered. Here, of course, I am having a lapel mic, so it doesn't matter even if I turn. But most of the time, the microphones are in such a way that if you turn away, you will not be heard. So make sure that if that is a situation, mention the name of the person, then only turn towards the person. It's a very conscious, deliberate move that you have to make. Otherwise, just when the name is to be mentioned, you will not be able to convey that name with the full effect. The rest of it on that page you can read on your own, some guidelines, but the important thing is not to overdo these introductions. So introduction of a chief guest requires a little bit of planning. Sometimes they are very particular about the way they are introduced. We had one Muttut who came to our campus, and he said, "You must never address me as Mr. Muttut. You must call me Sri Muttut, Muttut Finance." He's an alumnus of our university. When he came for the function, first thing he called us and said, "Please don't address me as Mr. Muttut. I must be called Sri Muttut." It's okay. That's fine. Because we are so used to, just another example I have, the former deputy minister of health in Malaysia, he came to our campus. First thing he called, he said, "Who's introducing me?" I was supposed to be introducing him. So he said, "Please note, my name is Dato Seri Sami Velu. I am not Velu." He repeatedly said, "Everybody calls me Velu. I am not Velu. I am Velu. You must address me as Dato Seri Sami Velu." Then he made me pronounce his name correctly. Then I had to practice. So when I had to introduce him later that evening, I made sure that I introduced him as Dato Seri Sami Velu. He was happy. But what I'm saying is some people are very particular about the way their name is pronounced or how they are addressed. If you have a chance to speak to them, it's always nice if you can talk to them. They are most of them are not too worried, but you shouldn't make a hash of that name. Then it becomes very difficult. And it was, I recall the incidents of this particular professor, Sunny Tharappan. He was being introduced, and the person being introduced was Sunny Tharappan, and the person introducing him thought he was from Coorg and said, "Sunny Tharappa." So somebody quickly went and whispered to him, "It is not Tharappa, it is Tharappan." So this fellow didn't hear it properly. He said, "I am pleased to introduce Sunny Appan Tara." From Sunny Tharappan he became Sunny Appan Tara. Now, what happens is, when you speak to somebody who is already here and you say it is not Tharappan, it is not Tharappa, it is Tharappan. He thought Sunny Appan, and he became a female, Sunny Appan Tara. Now, these are the risks involved. Please don't make a hash of the names. You have to take care, because names have to be pronounced in the way they want it to be heard and they want it to be pronounced. Recently, for the convocation, we had one Mr. Kadle. And the person introducing him went on saying, "Kadle, Kadle, Kadle, Kadle." Now, by the time the convocation speech, the introduction was over, the Kadle came so frequently, people became quite amused with the Kadle. You know what the meaning of Kadle is. Kadle locally means groundnut. So, this is the risk involved. So, when you have the person introduced in a way and the name is mispronounced, there can be problems. So be careful when you introduce a person, don't cause embarrassment. Take a little extra care, because these little things matter in introduction. Any specific question you may have with reference to introducing a chief guest? The last segment we have before we have a break is master of ceremony. Any function is coordinated by the master of ceremony. Any function is managed by a master of ceremony who coordinates all the units. So, in one word, if you ask me, who is a master of ceremony? A master of ceremony is a link between one unit of the program and another unit of the program. A master of ceremony, whether it's a male or a female, will be called master of ceremony. There's no mistress of ceremony. It's always master of ceremony. But an MC or a master of ceremony is different from a compeer, C-O-M-P-E-R-E. Compeer is for a variety entertainment. A compeer may be able to dance, he may be able to be part of the entertainment, he may sing, he may do all that. That is a compeer. But a master of ceremony performs a solemn function on behalf of the organizers. So it's I don't say always serious, but at least it's a solemn event. You cannot have too much of fun in that sense. You're not a joker. So it's important that you function as a link. Now, as master of ceremony, there are some important guidelines to be remembered. Before I give you the handout, a few things to be shared with you. One is, it is your duty as master of ceremony to be there on time. If the function is starting at 4 o'clock, you have told everyone to be assembled by 3:50. People have assembled at 3:50. Function is to start at 4. It is your duty, out of respect for the people who have come there on time, you please be there sharp at 4. Please say, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am your master of ceremony for this evening's function. The function will start in another 15 minutes as the chief guest is held up, for whatever reason. While we wait for the function to start, which will happen around 4:15, let me share with you what is going to happen during this function. Let me share with you the program. Let me basically tell you what will be the events for this evening, whatever. What I am trying to tell you is, out of respect for the people who have assembled there on time, please take them into confidence, win their confidence, so that when the event proceeds, you have them with you. Otherwise, what happens? Nothing is happening at 4, nothing is happening 4:05, nothing is happened 4:10, people are getting restless, nothing is happening, nobody is coming onto the lectern. Then when 4:15, 4:20, somebody comes, by the time you have lost the audience. So one thing you should always do, respect the people who have come there on time, talk to them, tell them what is going to happen. We don't tell audience what is happening. We just keep them in the dark. So please do that. It will make a big difference eventually when you need to appeal to them for calm or quiet. It's also important as master of ceremony to indicate what people do during invocation. It happened to me many years ago when I was the dean of the college. I was sitting next to the lectern. My student was singing the invocation and I was looking at her. She was singing so well. I was admiring and appreciating the way she was singing. Halfway through the invocation, somebody was pushing me and said, "You are the only person seated. Everybody is standing." I was stunned. When I looked to the left, all the people to my left were standing. I couldn't see the audience in front because it was dark. The lights were flashing on my face. Then in the darkness, when I saw everybody had stood, it was silently they had stood up. I didn't realize. Invocation can be a cause of embarrassment. Luckily, it happened to me. If it had happened to the chief guest, it would have been very embarrassing. It didn't. Fortunately, it happened to me. It was okay. But I quickly stood up, and then the photographer was very kind. He waited for me to stand up, then only took the photo. Otherwise, he would have taken the photo and said, "Look at this fellow sitting. All others are standing." Why I am saying this? As master of ceremony, please announce what people should do during invocation, whether sitting or standing, one of the two. If you don't say anything, there can be confusion. It happened, the State Bank of India branch inauguration. I remember that incident very vividly. There were big people seated on the dais. Somebody was called to give the invocation. I was sitting somewhere in the audience. As she started the invocation, somebody stood up in the audience for whatever reason to go out, or I do not know. Somebody stood up. The person sitting on the dais saw somebody standing up. He thought he must stand up for invocation. So he stood up. When he stood up, people on either side stood up. When the audience saw these people standing up, they slowly started standing up. Some people were deciding to stand. Some people were standing. Some were still seated. Invocation was over. This lady has left. Invocation was forgotten. The risk with not giving clear instruction is people will be in a semi-standing or semi-sitting stage, or they'll be thinking whether to stand or sit. I am not saying you should stand. One thing you do, but don't leave it ambiguous. As master of ceremony, before the invocation, please announce, let us all remain seated during invocation. Or you say, let us all stand during one of the two. Please, whichever you think is appropriate, you may do. But whatever it is, let only one thing be done. Otherwise, there will be confusion. And the invocation, the purpose of it to start in a very solemn, symbolic beginning will often be lost. And the person will feel very bad. Somebody who is singing a prayer or giving a song, whatever, the rendition will be totally lost. So make sure that the sanctity of that event is maintained. It is also important that as a master of ceremony, you know who are the people on the days. Sometimes it may happen you don't know. That can cause embarrassment. It happened to me. Suddenly I was called one day to be the MC. The person who was supposed to be the MC suddenly had diarrhea. He could not come. So I was asked to suddenly fill in the last 10 minutes. I was given a program. It was Indo-China meet. So I stood there, I looked at the program, I read out one Chinese name. 2 people came from here. I was a little taken aback because I read only one Chinese name and 2 people are coming. When they came here, they said, I am the speaker and he is my interpreter. The speaker is going to speak in Chinese. The interpreter will translate into English. Then I said, only one mic is enough, no? Anyway, Chinese, nobody will understand. He said, no, my Chinese must be heard. The English also must be heard. So then we had to arrange 2 mics. It took some time. There was confusion. Why I am saying this? I was not aware of who is who, what all can happen. At one point, I had to call one Mr. Raja Mohan to speak. Raja Mohan, the only Indian name, and I saw one Indian who is sitting there whom I did not know. I thought this must be Raja Mohan. I looked at him and said, now Mr. Raja Mohan will speak. He was not moving. He was still looking at me. I said, now Mr. Raja Mohan will speak. Then somebody came from the audience and said, I am Raja Mohan. This can happen if you don't know who is who. Of course, I was trying to fill in. I was trying to help somebody who could not come in as an MC. As an MC, make sure you know who is who. You have conveyed what is needed and made sure that you have conveyed what is expected of each. Otherwise, there can be confusion and it will be very embarrassing. In spite of your best efforts, things can go wrong in being a master of ceremony. I am not saying this to scare you. It's just that you must be fully alert. Almost 16 years ago, Manipal University conferred honorary doctorates to 3 luminaries. One was Abdul Kalam, one was Nani Palkiwala, and third was C. Subramaniam. C. Subramaniam was former finance minister, food minister. Abdul Kalam, all of you know, and Nani Palkiwala, most of you would have heard of. It so happened 2 of them could not travel to Manipal. They could not come to Manipal University campus. So because their health didn't permit, C. Subramaniam was very old. Nani Palkiwala was also requiring assistance to travel. So we held the function in Chennai. It was held in Bharati Vidya Bhavan. And the function was organized very well. We had 2 lecterns. There was one lectern there and one lectern here. In the center was seated Abdul Kalam, Nani Palkiwala and C. Subramaniam. One side was the Chancellor, Dr. Ramdas Pai. On the other side was the then Vice Chancellor, Professor B.M. Hegde. So 5 of them were seated there. And at one point, I was standing there at the lectern that was provided for me as the MC. I made an announcement that Sri M. V. Kamath, Prasar Bharati Chairman, Sri M. V. Kamath will now introduce Sri C. Subramaniam. That is the announcement I made, that M. V. Kamath will now introduce C. Subramaniam. M. V. Kamath came to this lectern. By the time he came, what happened was C. Subramaniam, he was hard of hearing. He could not hear much. He was very old, very irritable. When he heard C. Subramaniam, he thought he had to speak. he immediately picked up the mic in front of his table. And he wanted to speak because he thought he had to speak, because he thought I said that C. Subramaniam will speak, because he was not hearing everything clearly. When this happened, the assistant, one attendant was behind him. He immediately came to me and said, please don't stop him. Please allow him to speak. If you stop him now, he will not speak. He will get irritated. He might even walk out. So please don't stop him. I was in a very delicate situation. M.V. Kamath has arrived here. I am standing there. C. Subramaniam getting ready to speak. Whom will I tell not to speak? Because I had the risk involved that if I tell Subramaniam not to speak, he might never speak at all. Luckily, at that time, I looked at the Vice Chancellor, Professor B.M. Hegde. He came immediately to my lectern and announced, now Sri C. Subramaniam will speak. Sri M.V. Kamath was given a chair. He was made to sit down there. C. Subramaniam spoke. After that again, Professor B.M. Hegde came and announced, now Sri M.V. Kamath will introduce C. Subramaniam. The introduction of C. Subramaniam happened after his speech. Today I am saying this in a lighter vein. But please remember, those were tense moments. I didn't know what to do, how things will go. In spite of all the planning that you may do as a master of ceremony, things can go wrong. Sri Pranab Mukherjee came to our university to inaugurate the Center for Asian Studies. At that time, I was the Vice Chancellor. I was sitting beside him. On the other side, the Chancellor was there. And the MC announced, now we request Sri Pranab Mukherjee to light the lamp and inaugurate the Center for Asian Studies. So we stood up and we came. Suddenly we found there was no lamp, there was no light. Everything was removed by security, because security removed everything. They didn't tell us. And it was such a shock for us. We came here, we were looking at each other, no light, no lamp. Sri Pranab Mukherjee was very kind. He said, assume that I have lit it, don't worry. Then he came and gave his inaugural speech. Nobody told. The security never bothered to tell. This is what happens. And everybody pounced later on the master of ceremony saying she did not take care. Actually, she took care of everything. Only thing was, the removal was not informed to her. Why I am saying this? As an MC, be prepared for things that you may not expect. But it's important that you go on. Of course, after that, the function went off well. Even that event where Nani Palkiwala, all of the event went off well, except for that little confusion, those 3 or 4 minutes, tense moments, everything went off well. What I am trying to say is, as an MC, maintain the equanimity to continue. Maintain that balance. Don't get ruffled by these things. You must be prepared. You must be on your toes, practically. Otherwise, there is always a risk involved that if you get ruffled, then the entire function looks a little disjointed and there can be problems. It is very important as a master of ceremony that you maintain the connect. If you don't maintain the connect, there can be problems. And very often a master of ceremony is remembered when things go wrong. If everything goes well, the master of ceremony is forgotten. In a way, it's good. It's better that you're forgotten. It is not ceremony of the master, it is master of ceremony. You should not become so conspicuous that you steal the show. So make sure that you do. Now, what are the guidelines for being the master of ceremony? Let us look at these guidelines. You have the guidelines for being an MC. I'm not going into all of them. I'll quickly run through these guidelines. The first one is don't talk too much. As an MC, don't talk too much. Don't be very verbose. Don't be very bombastic. That's what is conveyed in that first guideline. Thou shalt not be inebriated with the exuberance of thy own verbosity simply means don't talk too much. As an MC, connect one unit of the program with another. You shall dress appropriately means whatever is comfortable for you, please wear. Don't wear anything that will make you to trip and fall. Please check the program, inform the people what the program is beforehand. Please give the time. All the people including the chief guest, may be informed how much time is there so that you have control over the program. 5 is very, very, very important. 5. You shall be seen, never announced from backstage. An MC cannot be a divine voice. Dignitaries, please go to the dais. People are looking from where the voice is coming. It cannot be a divine voice. The MC must be visible. The MC must be seen. Either you come behind the lectern or you have a table and a chair and sit somewhere and announce so that you are visible. You shall act as a link between the units of the program. You shall keep the objectives of the program in mind. Don't summarize, don't comment on what speakers have said. Don't elaborate the thank you. What do you mean by this? For one person you say, thank you very much for the wonderful, inspiring speech. For the next person you simply say, thank you. When you only say thank you to the second person, he's going to be upset. Why only thank you for me? For the previous person you said, wonderful, inspiring speech. So be careful when you be an MC, just connect. Don't joke, don't make superfluous comments. Be responsive to the mood of the audience. It's possible that people become restless. You will have to appeal to them. The way to win their confidence is to keep talking to them. Please treat all participants equally. 13 I mentioned already. Thou shalt not steal the show. Thou art the master of the ceremony. In no way is it the ceremony of the master. These are some guidelines. The simple thing to remember is you are the connect between one unit of the program and another. Before you go for the break, I have one more handout which is for you to read on your own. Different types of speeches. Depending on the occasion, you may be required to give different types of speeches. So